So, good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Talent Finders would like to welcome entrepreneur, founder of Coco and Artisan Nation, Danielle Chiel. So, welcome, Danielle.
Hi, Karen. Thank you.
So Danielle, firstly, I'd like to congratulate you on all your achievements and the incredible work you are doing with women in India. Can you please share with our audience how your journey started and how you got to where you are today?
Wow, that's a lot of years to cover, Karen. I'm firmly entrenched in the middle age bracket.
Okay.
But the summary is actually my journey started because I was raised by parents that were in business. Both my parents were pharmacists, and I remember as a little girl going behind the counter, and when somebody had to wait for pills to be made, my father would put me up on the counter, and I would always say, "This lipstick looks really nice with that dress that you're wearing." So I learned to have to engage with people and to sell from a very early age. And at home, both my parents, because they were in business together, would discuss different things that happened in the business and how they would manage this. So because of that background, I guess I don't know any different, and I've been in business all my life.
Yes.
Doing various ventures along the way. However, this particular venture started when I was 10. I was home from school sick and I can't remember whether it was the measles or the chicken pox, but I do remember my great aunt came to mind me. Ironically enough, her name was Auntie Pearl.
Oh,
And
wow.
yes, she taught me how to knit. And when I showed my mother what I did, she was always a very fantastic supporter of any hobby that I did. She went out and bought one ball of wool in every colour. Australia only had one type of wool in those days, so I was pretty privileged. And I made this blanket, and it was love at first sight for that. So I had this huge multicoloured blanket and a little 10-year-old girl, and that's where this passion for colour and texture started. But then I went through a whole journey of music, and that was a long time. I ended up with a PhD in music. I grew up in Brisbane, Australia, and lived for a few years in Hungary, and I got my master's degree in Boston, and I got my PhD from the University of Queensland in Australia. So that was a little step to the side in music. And then my current venture, which is the Artisan Nation,
Yes.
actually grew out of my hand knitting business in India called Coco.
Amazing. Amazing, amazing. So, you've obviously first started out, as you've just mentioned, founding Coco, and have recently expanded into the Artisan Nation. So was this an organic process for you?
It was. It really was, and it just flowed naturally. So I had the business called Coco, which is based in India, and we hand knit for fashion brands around the world. So that involved going into rural villages where the ladies have never been to school, and we teach them a trade, hand knitting, the same as plumbing, electrical work, tiling. And to learn to hand knit, they need to learn basic English and maths. And so that business, and they get full-time work, the ladies get full-time work from that. And that business was firmly established. However, the way the Artisan Nation came about from that was that at the lockdown period, as you know, all countries were impacted. There were no planes anywhere. So we went from having 5 villages of hand knitters to 2 villages of hand knitters. And at that time, when I was thinking about what to do with my own business, I received an email from somebody in India, and it said, "Danielle, currently because of COVID, there are 16 million people alone in the fashion industry who are currently unemployed. Can you do something? And, you know, long story short, I suppose 48 hours later, I thought, you know what, I can.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it never would have occurred to me if that question wasn't asked.
Yes.
And so I realized that I am in a very privileged position of being able to connect the developed world and the developing world. I'm the bridge.
Yes.
And in the developing world, we can now offer many mediums, crocheting, all the wonderful embroidery that India does, block printing, and it's stamped with our COCO quality control system, because I've been doing this for so many years. You know, we knit for top runway brands, so the quality control is fairly tight. And then we link it with brands and corporates in the developed world. And the reason that corporates came into it is because it's crucial. All people who work want a stable income and a stable life.
Of course.
And the fashion brands would give orders of, I'll have 1,000 this season, and I'll have 40 the next season, and the next season I don't want any, then the next season I'll have 200.
Yes.
So it was very, very challenging. And the corporates are a much more stable process for them to become involved. And so that's how it became to be born.
That's amazing. That's wonderful. And also just empowering these women is incredible as well. So you've had a very diverse career from teaching to earning a PhD in musicology. Can you give us some background into this, and how did this influence you in creating these two businesses?
Yes, well, interestingly enough, it might appear that it's quite diverse from the outside,
Yes.
but the reality is they're not that different. So music is in the what I would term the oral arts, and hand knitting is what I call the visual arts. And they're actually exactly the same. So to use the analogy of those two mediums, the players in the orchestra are the knitters of the garment.
Yes.
The composer is the designer of the garment. And the people who sit in the audience to listen to the music are the people who admire your garments when you're walking down the street.
Yes, makes perfect sense. So they're interlinked for sure.
Very much so. And my speciality in music was sequential analysis and sequential thinking. And hand knitting is exactly the same, to implement the systems to roll that out. So, as I said, it looks like there are very diverse areas, but the reality is one is just superimposed on the other.
Yeah, absolutely. So that leads me to what would you say some of your biggest career lessons have been?
That's a really hard question, because, you know, as you go through life, it's very hard to think of a moment that was your peak learning.
Moment.
That was a big learning lesson, or this was, you know, an outstanding thing that I needed to learn. But I guess if I was to generalize, which is wrong really, it's when something doesn't go according to plan, it's super important to carefully think through what your contribution was to this situation and work out what can be done differently.
So I want to talk about and elaborate more on the Artisan Nation and your deep passion for these incredibly talented women in India. We so often see big brands being manufactured internationally and then sold for thousands of dollars globally. But very often, the very women and the names and faces behind these beautifully crafted products never ever get recognized. I understand that the narrative of the Artisan Nation is going to be the change agent for these incredibly talented women. So can you share with us more about how you are not only looking to do this for amazing women in India, but on a global scale?
Whoa, that's a lot of information there. I might have to, if I can remember it, I might have to divide that into 2 sections.
No worries.
So first of all, I'd just like to talk about the passion for these women.
Yes.
That I don't know if you've had the experience of meeting somebody and you can't speak their language. But in this instance, it was all eyes and hands.
Yes.
Because I couldn't speak Tamil and they can't speak English. So they took my hand and walked me around the village. And I could tell by the way they were pointing that this is where I live. This is my mother. These are my children. And so on the very first day of the very first time of meeting them, I felt a connection of total welcoming into their entire village.
Yes.
And there was some two-way magical experience that went on. And that's how I became, I guess you used the word deeply passionate for these women. And most of them had never been to school. Yeah. And I write about it as saying little formal education, but that actually means they might have been to school for grade 1 or 2, up to grade 3 at the absolute max. And I realized that there are so many things that you learn at school other than intellectual input. But as you know, if you do well at school, it's often on application, not on natural intellect. And so I realized that from starting to work with these ladies that they're incredibly talented and they're just like you and me, Karen. They just want a stable income. They want roof over their head.
Yes.
If you have children, they want them to be educated and do well. And they'd like just a good quality life. So I could relate to them and they could relate to me from the very beginning.
Yes.
Now, the next part of what you asked me was how the Artisan Nation is going to impact and be the change agent for these women.
Yes.
And the Artisan Nation will do 2 things. One, it will supply regular, stable work. And this is just super important because, you know, when women go to work, it actually reduces anxiety and depression.
Absolutely.
And so it does so many things. It lifts the standard of their lives, both physically, you know, with a roof over their head and food, and psychologically.
Yes.
But in addition to that, these ladies, you know, we have some brands who ask us to take off the Made in India label. We have, these ladies are anonymous, and it's my mission actually to give them a voice. That talented people and furthermore, all people deserve to be recognized. And that's what the Artisan Nation will do. Well, it does that.
Oh no, that's amazing.
That answers the question.
So, yeah, no, that's fine. So, but how do you plan on also expanding beyond India? Like, what is your
there's over 100,000 rural villages in India. So if we get to do it outside India, that just means that we're thriving incredibly hugely.
Yes.
But it's exactly the same system that would work if it was in Africa and South America and other developing nations.
Yes, absolutely. And it's also important to bring industries back into back into other countries as well, and acknowledge, acknowledge the talents in those countries as well. So female empowerment is a term that is thrown around a lot, and has almost lost its meaning. So why do you believe that as a woman we still have these challenges, and how do you believe we can change the narrative to become fully sustainable?
I've never actually heard of female empowerment and fully sustainable used together like this. However, I'm guessing it means when is the change, where's a change of the habit here to stay? In other words, speaking up here to stay. And in the case of the Artisan Nation, I'll interpret that question as meaning, when will the artisan have their voice permanently heard?
Yes.
And from the very beginning, when the ladies are involved with the Artisan Nation, they're taught to think for themselves because of the quality control process that's involved. So they're asked questions like, is it the same or different? And it might seem a very basic question, but until they start working with us, the ladies have actually never made a decision for themselves, ever. They do what their parents want, and then they do what their father wants.
Yes.
So they have absolutely been stripped of any decision-making skills. And so it starts immediately. And when is it there permanently? When they implement it into their own family life, which happens within the first month.
Wow, that's amazing.
Well, it is amazing because they learn from following the quality control process. Is this okay or is this not okay? And so they learn to speak up very strongly to their husbands too when they go to hit them, and they learn to say, this is not okay.
Yeah.
So for me, for a voice to be, as you've used the word, fully sustainable, and I call it be there permanently, once somebody has done that more than 1, 2, or 3 times, it's there. It's permanently ingrained.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, and just be able to create those changes that also impact them in their daily and home lives is also I feel it's vitally important as well. So I want to talk about leadership, or the lack of leadership, and what do you believe makes your leadership style different, and how do you believe you can further empower these women to become great leaders within their own communities and create a ripple effect?
Well, I never really thought of myself as a leader, but I am aware to these ladies that through the years I have been a very strong role model for them.
Yes.
Some people call my style collaborative. I'm not sure that my children would actually agree that. So from my point of view, there's a time and a place for all styles. And the key is to know how to use which one and when.
Yeah.
So when it comes to leadership, I actually think the same style of what I call independent thinking is super important.
Yes.
And that's why the Giving Artisan a Voice is the mission, because independent thinking is what makes a leader. And it's not about knowing the answer. So if any of the ladies come to me and ask, how do we do this? Or I've got a problem, what am I going to do? I rarely answer the question for them. My response is always, let's brainstorm all the possible solutions together.
Yes.
So
because that's where they find the answers themselves, which is
100%. And the thing that Yes, and the thing that I do that makes them take it seriously is I take a pen and paper
Mm-hmm.
always, and I write down all the brainstorming ideas. And I give ideas too, because otherwise they're stuck in their own thinking.
Yes.
And I intentionally give really stupid ideas so that they can unlock their thinking. But I'd say that is how they will transform to be leaders in their own communities, because they do it at home. They transfer those same skills when their children want something.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So, what would you say have been some of your biggest career highlights? Is there one particular thing that stands out, or are there a number of things that stand out for you during your career?
Well, I suppose there's, what I call the traditional extrinsic piece of paper awards.
Yes.
I've had a few of those in my life. The first one I had when I was a little girl, when I was 10, I won the needlework prize. Another one that happened when I was a little girl, I was 13 years old and I won piano playing in an Eisteddfod. More, through the years, I was a scholarship when I did my PhD, and through the years, I've been fairly fortunate. I've won the Australian Indian Small Business Award, lots of things like that along the way. The most recent one, though, was when we were named by B Corp for being one of the best in the world. It was quite an honor for building strong communities. But the peak of the awards, or the rewards of my highlight, comes when one of the ladies came to me and said, when I said to her, "You look so happy today," she said, "Yes, my husband hasn't hit me for a week." And
That's
that
amazing.
was my career highlight.
Yeah, that's amazing. Wow. So, what are some of the dramatic changes you have seen within these communities, and also some of the changes you have seen during this pandemic? Um, and how have these amazing, talented women managed? And can you give us some examples?
That's a long 3-question question. So I'm just going to break that down, Karen.
No, don't
So
worry.
the changes within the communities,
Mm.
of course, are led by the ladies themselves, and it starts out when they start working with me, because they have a regular income. It's a Cinderella story.
Mm.
They can afford to buy themselves a new sari, and when they come to work every day, they dress up to come to work, and this is a new thing for the ladies. So it's the pride that they take in themselves, and the pride when they go to collect their children from school, and this same pride carries through to the work that they do for you and for consumers. They take pride in everything, and they never imagined that they would have employment within their own community, and they're
Yes.
just so proud of that. And the next question that you asked me was some of the changes that I've seen during this pandemic.
Yes.
Well, India is rife, with the virus, as probably everybody knows.
Yes.
But they're very strict. And so if somebody in your street gets COVID, the whole street is locked down for 2 weeks. But like the rest of the world, they're all bonded together and we all care about each other. That I've managed to keep giving the ladies regular work. And we're all most grateful that the world is crying out for connection with people.
Absolutely, because that's been the biggest thing is connection, or the lack of connection.
Exactly. And so, the ladies are connected with each other, the world's connected with us, and the world's seeking these sorts of products now with that have a direct impact on the maker.
Absolutely. So, I obviously want to touch on the fashion industry and how COVID-19 has turned the entire industry and the world upside down and forced the entire industry to look at how things are done, from overproducing to becoming far more conscious of the environmental impact. So how do you believe the Artisan Nation is going to change this and not only produce good quality garments, but also recognize the names and faces and talent behind these beautiful garments? And how, I mean, you have touched on the corporate, but I just want to highlight the point again. So how corporates are getting involved will not only force the change in their consumer habits with more thoughtful and mindful way of spending, but also consuming and still getting real tangible ROI on the investments. So, and then also with the knowledge that they are helping not only those women in India to sustain themselves, but also their families. So I know that's a lot, but I just wanted to kind of cover, cover that part of the fashion industry, and what do you think the changes are going to be or are?
Yeah, so I guess there's a few points in there to address, but one of the things is that when anybody buys or receives products made by members of the Artisan Nation, that there will be a swing tag on every item that
Yes.
has a barcode where you can scan and read about the ladies that made it. So it's one of my visions is to be able to connect the maker with the end consumer.
Yes.
But to ask, to go back to an earlier part of your question where you talked about the fashion industry and waste. So we're actually a no waste company, and all the other members of the Artisan Nation will be exactly the same, because
Yes.
all the products are actually made on request, that there won't be any finished items, because the item will be especially made for the person who places the order.
Yes.
And because of that, that will stop wastage. For example, the corporates, if they decide to give all their staff members birthday gifts, they would have products from the Artisan Nation.
Yes.
To support their gift giving program. So that will stop the wastage of the environmental impact. What were the other questions in that bit that you asked me, Karen? Does that give insight?
Yeah, no, that gives a lot of insight, because I think, a lot of people are asking those questions, especially now, during this pandemic, and how it's changed, how it's changed the fashion industry as a whole. So I think that that's very helpful for people. And, obviously it's more authentic in a way, because, a lot of these, other companies are just overproducing. Like you say, there's a lot of waste. So no, 100% answers the question. So what is your biggest vision for both Coco and the Artisan Nation?
Well, it's my mission to ensure that all these artisans have a voice.
Yes.
That if you're the best cricket player in the world, everybody knows your name.
Yes.
If you're the best film composer in the world, everybody knows your name.
Yes.
If you're an interviewer in the world, everybody knows your name. And many of these artisans are the best in the world at what they do, and nobody knows their name externally in the world, and their husband doesn't listen to what they say. Yeah. So it's my mission to ensure that they have a voice, both at home and for the world, and that the whole world recognizes that talent. And yes. I would just dream that every lady in rural India knows how to write her name, and people recognize her name, yes. both at home and for what she creates.
Yeah. Absolutely. So that leads me to the final question. And that is, what legacy or how would you like to be remembered?
I really struggle with questions like this because I don't really mind if I'm not remembered, because for me, what's super important, as I said, is that the ladies are recognized
Yes.
for who they are. So if that actually occurs, I would be over the moon.
Yes, because that's the legacy you would be leaving, really, is the, imparting, um, and giving them the exposure and the recognition that they need. So I think that's very powerful, because it becomes not about you, but more about, other people. So it's really significant.
Exactly. Thank you. Yes.
So I want to thank you so much for your time. And if people would like to get in contact with you, what are the best platforms to do so?
So the website,
Yes.
theartisannation.com, has a contact form. My name is Danielle, so it's Danielle at the Artisan Nation is the email address. You're welcome to contact me via any of those mediums, and we'd love to hear from anybody who would like to be a part of the Artisan Nation.
Well, thank you so much, Danielle, for your time today, and hopefully we can have you back in the future to see where you are and where your projects have taken you, and what you've managed to achieve. And thank you again for your time.
Thanks so much, Karen. You're most welcome.